The stars had always been there, distant and quiet, waiting for humanity to reach them. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Valiant, staring at something impossible. A holographic image floated in the center of the room, showing a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. The alien's name was Keltharis, and he was an ambassador from something called the Galactic Council. Jake had been a military pilot for 15 years, had flown missions that would make most people sick just hearing about them, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. First contact, real aliens. Not little green men from old movies, but actual beings from across the galaxy, who had been watching humanity for a very long time. Keltharis spoke in perfect English, though his voice had a strange musical quality to it. "Greetings, Captain Morrison. We have monitored your species for 300 of your years. Now that you have achieved faster-than-light travel, you are eligible to join the galactic community." Commander Lisa Bennett stood next to Jake, her hand resting on her sidearm out of habit. She was the best tactical officer in the fleet, sharp as a knife and twice as dangerous. "That sounds like good news. What's the catch?" The crystal alien seemed to appreciate her directness. "There is always a test, Commander. Every species must prove they are worthy through the trials of ascension. These challenges were designed by the Council's founding races over 10,000 years ago. They test strength, intelligence, survival, and leadership." Lieutenant Chris Palmer, the ship's tactical officer, pulled up data on his screen. He was young, barely 28, but he had a mind like a computer. "Sir, I'm reading the trial requirements they just sent over." "This doesn't look good." Jake walked over to review the information. The first trial was a physical combat challenge against the Crothian warriors, a species that stood 9 feet tall and could lift small vehicles. The second trial required telepathic negotiation with a collective consciousness called the Mindari. Humans had no telepathic abilities at all. The third trial was environmental survival in conditions that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. The fourth trial was classified, but the description mentioned impossible choices and leadership under pressure. Lisa read over his shoulder and let out a low whistle. "These challenges seem designed for species with natural advantages we don't have. We're not 9 feet tall. We can't read minds. We're not built for extreme environments." Keltharis watched them review the trials with what might have been curiosity. It was hard to read emotions on a face made of crystal. Many species have attempted the trials. Some succeed, most fail. A few choose not to attempt them at all, remaining isolated from the galactic community. What will humanity choose? Jake looked at his crew. Lisa had her arms crossed, already thinking tactically. Chris was running calculations on his computer. Down in engineering, he knew Sophie Martin was probably already designing solutions to problems she didn't even fully understand yet. Back on Earth, the brightest minds humanity had ever produced were waiting for his decision. He thought about every underdog story in human history. Every time someone said something was impossible and humans did it anyway. Flying was impossible until the Wright brothers proved otherwise. Going to the moon was impossible until Armstrong took that first step. Breaking the light-speed barrier was impossible until Dr. Helen Price figured out the quantum fold drive 3 years ago. Jake smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made his enemies nervous. "Ambassador Keltharis, humanity accepts your challenge. When do we start?" The crystal alien seemed surprised, though again it was hard to tell. "You do not wish to deliberate? Consult with your leaders? Most species take weeks to decide." "We just did decide," Lisa said. "Humans don't waste time talking when there's work to be done." Within 6 hours, the message had reached Earth. President Karen Foster called an emergency meeting of the world's top scientists, military leaders, and strategists. The meeting took place in a secure facility deep under the Rocky Mountains, where the brightest minds on the planet gathered around a massive conference table. Dr. Helen Price was the first to speak. She was a thin woman in her 50s with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had won 3 Nobel Prizes and turned down 4 more because she didn't have time for award ceremonies. "I've reviewed the trial data. The challenges are designed to be nearly impossible for humans. But nearly impossible is not the same as actually impossible." Colonel Danny Wright nodded. He was a decorated Special Forces commander who had led missions in places that didn't officially exist. "The combat trial is the most straightforward. They want us to fight one of their champions. They expect us to lose because we're smaller and weaker." "Then we don't fight their way," Sophie Martin said. She was an engineer who had designed the revolutionary exosuit systems that allowed soldiers to operate in extreme conditions. She was only 32, but had already changed modern warfare 3 times. We use technology to level the field. That's what humans do. We make tools. President Foster listened to the discussion with the patience of someone who had been making hard decisions for decades. She had led the world through the worst economic crisis in 2 centuries and had brought 12 nations together to fund the deep space program. If anyone could unite humanity for this challenge, it was her. What about the telepathy trial? We can't just build a machine that reads minds. Helen smiled. Actually, we can. Not true telepathy, but we can create neural interfaces that simulate it. If we can connect human brains to quantum computers, we can process and transmit thoughts faster than biological telepathy. We won't have their natural ability, but we'll have something that works just as well. Chris Palmer had been listening to the meeting via satellite link from the Valiant. What about the environmental survival trial? The atmosphere in the testing zone is toxic, the temperature swings are extreme, and the gravity would crush us. Sophie was already sketching designs on her tablet. Adaptive environmental suits, self-regulating temperature control, pressure compensation, atmospheric filtration. We'll also deploy drone swarms to map the environment ahead of time. The rules say we have to survive the environment. They don't say we have to do it the same way other species do. Colonel Danny Wright leaned back in his chair. I'm starting to see a pattern here. They set rules based on their biology and their evolution. They assume everyone will approach the challenges the same way, but humans don't have their natural advantages. No, we don't, Karen Foster said, but we have something they might not expect. We have 10,000 years of human history teaching us that when someone says something is impossible, we find a way to do it anyway. We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest. We're not the most naturally gifted, but we're the species that refuses to accept no for an answer. Back on the Valiant, Jake Morrison received confirmation from Earth Command. They were going forward with the trials. Teams were already being assembled. Scientists were working around the clock. Engineers were building prototypes. Soldiers were training for scenarios they barely understood. Keltharis appeared on the view screen again. Captain Morrison, the first trial will take place in 2 weeks on Crotha Prime. You will face our champion in single combat. I suggest you send your largest, strongest warrior. Jake looked at the message from Earth Command. The name at the top of the list made him smile again. Corporal Amy Hudson, 5 foot 4 inches tall, 130 pounds, martial arts expert and the top-rated pilot for the new combat exosuits. We'll be there, Ambassador, Jake said. And we'll send exactly who we want to send. After the transmission ended, Lisa looked at him. You really think we can do this? Win challenges designed by species that have advantages we'll never have? Jake thought about it for a moment. Lisa, humans walked on the moon using computers less powerful than the phone in your pocket. We split the atom. We cured diseases. We built cities in deserts and grew food in frozen wastelands. Every single time someone told us we couldn't do something, we proved them wrong. These aliens think they know what's possible. They're about to learn what happens when you challenge humans to do the impossible. Chris Palmer grinned. So basically they set the rules and we're going to break them? Not break them, Jake corrected. We're going to follow every single rule they set. We're just going to do it in ways they never imagined. That's the human advantage. We don't have telepathy or super strength or natural environmental resistance. What we have is 10,000 years of practice at looking at impossible problems and finding solutions anyway. The Valiant set course for Crotha Prime. In 2 weeks, humanity would face its first trial. The Galactic Council expected them to fail. They expected humans to be overwhelmed by the challenge, to give up or to die trying. They had no idea what was coming. Crotha Prime was a world that looked like it had been designed for war. The planet's sky was a deep red color, and massive rock formations jutted up from the ground like the teeth of some ancient beast. The gravity was 30% higher than Earth's, enough to make every step feel heavy and every movement exhausting. The Crothians had evolved here, and it showed in their massive frames and incredible strength. The Valiant landed at the designated coordinates, and Jake Morrison led his team down the ramp. Waiting for them was a crowd of Crothians, each one towering over the humans. They looked like someone had taken a gorilla, made it walk upright, covered it in rocky armor-like skin, and then doubled its size. Their champion, a warrior named Grumath, stood in the center of the arena. He was 9.5 feet tall and probably weighed close to 800 pounds of solid muscle. Ambassador Keltharis floated nearby, his crystalline form catching the red sunlight. Captain Morrison, this is your final chance to reconsider. The combat trial has injured many and killed some. Your species is not built for this kind of challenge. Jake looked up at Grumeth, who was cracking his enormous knuckles. The sound was like rocks grinding together. We're not reconsidering, Ambassador. We're here to win. Then present your champion. The boarding ramp of the Valiant lowered again and Corporal Amy Hudson walked out. She was wearing what looked like a standard pressure suit. Nothing fancy or obviously military. She stood barely over 5 feet tall and looked like a strong wind might blow her over. Next to Grumeth, she looked like a child standing next to a building. The Crothian started laughing. It was a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the ground. Even Keltharis seemed confused. Captain, surely this is a mistake. She will be killed instantly. Amy walked up to Jake and gave him a crisp salute. She had been a gymnast before joining the military, and her small size had always been an advantage in her mind. Not a weakness. She could move faster, fit into smaller spaces, and now with Sophie Martin's technology, she was about to prove that size didn't matter. No mistake, Ambassador, Jake said. You said defeat your champion in single combat. You never said how. Those are your rules, right? Keltharis paused, and Jake could have sworn the crystal alien looked worried. The rules stand as written. Let the combat begin. Amy walked to the center of the arena. Grumeth looked down at her with something like pity in his eyes. He spoke in a deep voice that had been translated through the communication devices everyone wore. Little human, you are brave but foolish. I will try to make this quick. Thanks, Amy said. That's real nice of you. The signal to begin echoed across the arena. Grumeth charged forward like a freight train, his massive feet shaking the ground with each step. He was fast for his size, covering the distance between them in seconds. His fist came down like a hammer, aimed at where Amy was standing. She wasn't there anymore. Her suit activated with a sound like compressed air releasing. Hydraulic systems that Sophie Martin had spent 2 weeks perfecting kicked in. The exosuit didn't look like much from the outside, but it amplified Amy's movements by a factor of 100. When she moved with the strength of 100 people her size. Amy sidestepped Grumeth's punch so fast it looked like she had teleported. The Crothian's fist hit the ground where she had been standing, creating a small crater. Before he could recover, Amy's powered punch caught him in the ribs. The impact sounded like a car crash. Grumeth stumbled sideways, his eyes wide with shock. In his entire life, no one had ever hit him hard enough to make him move. He roared and swung again, this time with both fists. Amy ducked under the first swing, blocked the second with her forearm, and the suit systems absorbed the impact without breaking. Then she went on the attack. Using the propulsion jets hidden in her boots, Amy launched herself upward. She flew 10 feet into the air and delivered a devastating kick to Grumeth's jaw. The Crothian warrior's head snapped back and he fell like a tree being cut down. He hit the ground so hard it created a dust cloud. The arena went completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. Grumeth lay on his back unconscious, a thin line of blue blood trickling from his mouth. Amy landed lightly on her feet, the suit systems powering down to standby mode. She walked over to where the Galactic Council members were standing and gave them a small wave. So did I pass? The silence continued for another few seconds. Then one of the council members, a slug-like creature from a species called the Vorash, spoke up. This is cheating. She used technology to enhance her natural abilities. That goes against the spirit of the trial. Colonel Danny Wright had been waiting for this. He stepped forward and his voice carried across the arena. Show me where in your rules it says we can't use technology. We read every single word of the trial requirements. It says single combat. We brought one fighter. It says defeat your champion. We did that. It says the fight ends when one combatant can't continue. Grumeth can't continue. The council members huddled together, speaking in languages the translators couldn't quite follow. Jake watched them with his arms crossed, looking calm. Inside, his heart was racing. If they disqualified humanity now, everything would be over before it really began. Keltharis separated from the group and floated over to where Amy stood. She had removed her helmet, and her short dark hair was plastered to her head with sweat. The fight had only lasted about 90 seconds, but the suit drew power from her movements and it was exhausting to use. How much can you lift without the suit? Keltharis asked. Amy shrugged. Maybe 120 pounds if I'm having a good day. Why? And with the suit? The test system showed about 12,000 pounds, but we didn't want to push it too hard before the actual trial. Keltharis turned to look at the other council members. She just defeated our strongest warrior using 1/100th of his natural strength. She did it with technology, yes, but technology that her species created. The Crothians used their natural armor. The Mindari used their collective consciousness. The Xelians used their environmental adaptations. Every species uses what evolution gave them. Humanity's evolution gave them hands that make tools and brains that solve problems. Disqualifying them for using technology is the same as disqualifying the Crothians for being strong. The debate went on for 3 hours. The council had never faced this situation before. Every other species that had taken the trials had used their natural biological advantages. Humanity was using technology as a substitute for the biology they didn't have. Finally, the decision came. Keltharis announced it to everyone present. The Galactic Council has voted. The victory stands. Humanity has passed the first trial. However, we want it noted that this interpretation of the rules was not what the founding races intended. Jake smiled. With respect, Ambassador, maybe your founding races should have been more specific. We followed the rules exactly as they were written, Lisa Bennett whispered to Chris Palmer. We just made them rewrite 10,000 years of trial rules because they assumed everyone would think like them. Chris grinned. That's what we do best, find the loopholes nobody else noticed. Amy was helped back to the ship by the medical team. Using the suit was safe, but it took a lot out of the user. Sophie Martin met her at the entrance, practically bouncing with excitement. It worked perfectly. The power systems held up, the hydraulics performed exactly as calculated, and the impact absorption was even better than we hoped. It was amazing, Amy said, letting the medics guide her to a chair. I hit him so hard I thought my arm would break, but the suit just absorbed everything. Jake gathered his senior staff in the conference room. That was trial 1. What's next? Chris pulled up the data. The telepathic negotiation with the Mindari. It takes place in their home nebula, and it's scheduled for 3 weeks from now. We need to negotiate a trade agreement while they actively read our thoughts and intentions. Lisa looked skeptical. How exactly are we supposed to fool telepaths? They can literally see what we're thinking. Dr. Helen Price appeared on the view screen calling in from Earth. She looked tired but excited. We're not going to fool them. We're going to control what they see. I've been working with a team of neurologists and computer scientists. We're developing neural crowns that create controlled interference patterns in brain activity. Think of it like noise-canceling headphones, but for thoughts. Can you really do that? Jake asked. Helen smiled. Captain, 3 weeks ago people thought Amy couldn't beat a Crothian warrior. We made that happen. This is just another impossible problem that needs a solution. The Mindari read thoughts biologically. We're going to feed them thoughts technologically. They'll see what we want them to see. The Valiant left Crotha Prime with humanity's first victory secured. News of the trial had spread across Earth faster than light-speed communication. Billions of people had watched Amy Hudson defeat a warrior 3 times her size, using nothing but human engineering and determination. Children wore Amy Hudson masks for Halloween. Scientists named their daughters after her. The exosuit design was already being adapted for industrial use, medical applications, and disaster rescue. Humanity had won more than just a trial. They had proven something to themselves and to the galaxy. Back in the Crothian arena, Grumeth finally woke up. His jaw hurt, his pride. The Mindari home nebula was one of the most beautiful places in the galaxy. Clouds of glowing gas stretched for millions of miles, painted in colors that Earth didn't have names for. Floating among the gas clouds were thousands of crystalline structures, each one connected to the others through streams of light. This was where the Mindari lived, existing as a collective consciousness spread across an entire region of space. The Valiant approached slowly, following the navigation beacons the Mindari had provided. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the incredible view. He had seen a lot of amazing things since leaving Earth, but this was something else entirely. It looked like someone had taken the northern lights and spread them across half a solar system. Commander Lisa Bennett checked her instruments. Sir, I'm picking up some kind of energy readings from those crystal structures. It's like they're all connected by a massive neural network. That's exactly what they are, Dr. Alan Cooper said. He had joined the mission specifically for this trial, brought in because of his background in psychology and cognitive theory. He was a thin man in his 40s with a habit of talking with his hands. The Mindari don't have individual bodies like we do. Each crystal is part of one massive mind. They think together, decide together, exist together. Lieutenant Maya Torres sat at the communication station. She was young but brilliant, with degrees in game theory and strategic negotiation. She had also spent the last 3 weeks training with the neural crown device that Dr. Helen Price had developed. So how do we negotiate with a hive mind that can read our thoughts? Alan tapped his own neural crown, a thin band of metal that wrapped around his head like a simple headband. We show them what we want them to see. The crown doesn't block our thoughts. It creates layers, surface thoughts that are easy to read, and deeper thoughts that are hidden in electronic noise that looks like normal brain activity. The Mindari had sent instructions for the trial. The humans would negotiate a trade agreement regarding deuterium mining rights in a neutral sector. The Mindari would read their thoughts throughout the negotiation to determine their true intentions. Every species that had attempted this trial before had either been completely transparent, allowing the Mindari to dominate the negotiation, or had tried to hide their thoughts and been caught in the lie. The Valiant docked with one of the larger crystal structures. Jake, Alan, and Maya put on their neural crowns and stepped into the meeting chamber. The room was empty except for a circular platform in the center. As soon as they stepped onto it, the world changed. Suddenly, Jake could feel the presence of thousands of minds all around him. It wasn't like hearing voices. It was like knowing that someone was standing behind you without seeing them. The sensation was overwhelming and would have been terrifying if he hadn't been prepared for it. A voice spoke directly into their minds, harmonious and strange. Welcome, humans. We are the Mindari Consensus. We see your thoughts. We know your fears. We understand your hesitation. Alan took the lead just as they had planned. He stepped forward and thought clearly, letting the surface layer of his mind be completely open. We're nervous, yes. This is new for us. We've never negotiated with telepaths before. Your honesty is refreshing, the Mindari responded. Most species try to hide from us. They cannot. We see all. What the Mindari didn't know was that the neural crown was working exactly as designed. They could see Alan's surface thoughts, the ones about being nervous and uncertain. But underneath, hidden in layers of electronic noise that looked like normal background brain activity, his actual strategy was completely invisible. Maya began the negotiation. We're interested in deuterium mining rights in Sector 447. We understand your collective has claims to that area. The Mindari presence seemed to shift, like a massive attention turning toward her. We sense your interest is not purely commercial. You need deuterium for your faster-than-light drives. You plan to expand human presence in the galaxy. Maya let them see her agreement. Yes, that's true. We're not going to lie about that. We need the resources to grow. But what the Mindari couldn't see was Maya analyzing their response patterns. Every time the collective consciousness spoke, there was a tiny delay, a fraction of a second where the thousands of individual crystal structures synchronized their thoughts. Humans had spent thousands of years learning to read body language, facial expressions, and verbal tells. The Mindari had never needed to hide anything because nobody could lie to a telepath. The negotiation continued for hours. The Mindari would probe their thoughts, and Alan and Maya would let them see carefully constructed surface intentions while their real analysis happened in the protected layers beneath. It was like playing poker where your opponent could see your cards, so you had to control which cards they were looking at. You hesitate on the price, the Mindari observed. You believe 30 credits per unit is too high? Alan nodded. We do think it's high, but we also understand the value of your refinement process. Your deuterium is the purest in the galaxy. What they didn't let the Mindari see was that Maya had already calculated that 30 credits was actually a fair price based on galactic market rates. The hesitation was theater, designed to make the Mindari think they had the upper hand. We sense your acceptance, the Mindari said. You will agree to our price. Actually, Maya said carefully, we'd like to propose a different arrangement. She let them see her idea. Instead of a straight purchase, humanity would provide the Mindari with something they needed. The humans had noticed, through careful observation of the crystal structures, that some of them showed signs of degradation. The Mindari existed in a nebula, but even nebula gas could be corrosive over thousands of years. We have advanced materials science, Maya explained. We can help reinforce your structures, extend their lifespan by centuries. In exchange, we get mining rights and a reduced price on deuterium. The Mindari presence shifted again, and Jake could feel something like surprise rippling through the collective consciousness. You noticed our structural issues. Most species do not observe so carefully. We're good at noticing things, Alan said. It's one of our talents. The negotiation continued, but the dynamic had changed. The Mindari had expected to dominate the discussion because they could read human thoughts. What they hadn't expected was that humans could read them right back. Not through telepathy, but through careful observation and analysis. Maya noticed that the Mindari took longer to respond when they were uncertain. Alan noticed that the mental presence felt different when they were interested versus when they were just being polite. Together, they mapped out the Mindari's decision-making process without the aliens even realizing it was happening. 6 hours into the negotiation, they reached an agreement. Humanity would get mining rights to Sector 447, deuterium at 22 credits per unit, and a technology exchange program. In return, humans would help maintain the Mindari crystal structures and share their materials science research. It was the most favorable trade agreement any species had ever negotiated with the Mindari. When the deal was finalized, the collective consciousness seemed almost pleased. You have done well, humans. Better than we expected. How did you negotiate so effectively when we could see your every thought? Alan smiled and tapped his neural crown. You saw the thoughts we wanted you to see. The crown created a perfect surface layer that was completely honest. We really were nervous. We really did think your initial price was too high. We really did want to help with your structural problems. All of that was true, but, the Mindari prompted. But underneath that, we were analyzing you just as much as you were analyzing us. You can read minds biologically. We can read behavior technologically. You saw what we were thinking. We saw how you were reacting. In the end, we both got what we wanted. There was a long pause. Then the Mindari presence seemed to shift in a way that felt like laughter. Clever, very clever. You did not lie to us. You simply controlled which truths we saw first. This is a new experience for the Mindari consensus. Ambassador Keltharis had been observing the entire negotiation. His crystal form floated into the chamber, and he looked at the humans with what might have been respect. In 10,000 years, no species has ever negotiated better terms with the Mindari. Most leave with barely acceptable deals. Grateful that the telepaths didn't take everything. You achieved a mutual benefit that serves both parties equally. Jake finally spoke up. Ambassador, that's because most species probably approach this as a test to pass. We approached it as an actual negotiation. The Mindari needed their structures maintained. We needed deuterium. Both of those things were true. We just found a way to make both sides happy. The trial was declared complete. Humanity had passed the second challenge not by developing telepathy or by blocking the Mindari's mental reading, but by understanding that thoughts were just another form of communication. And humans had been mastering communication for as long as they had existed. Back on the Valiant, the crew celebrated quietly. 2 trials down, 2 more to go. But everyone knew the challenges were getting harder. The next trial was environmental survival in the Void Gardens of Zell, a place so hostile that only 3 species in the galaxy could survive there naturally. Sophie Martin was... The Void Gardens of Zell looked like something from a nightmare and a dream at the same time. Purple soil stretched across the landscape, covered in crystalline formations that grew in impossible shapes. Geysers of superheated steam erupted randomly, shooting hundreds of feet into the air. The sky was a sickly green color, thick with toxic gases that would dissolve human lungs in seconds. And over everything, the gravity pressed down with crushing force. Jake Morrison watched the video feed from the survey drones with a mixture of awe and concern. This was the 3rd trial, and it was designed to test environmental survival. The task seemed simple enough. Enter the Void Gardens, retrieve a quantum marker from the center, and return it to the starting point. The reality was that this environment killed unprotected humans almost instantly. Sophie Martin stood next to him, and she actually looked happy. She had spent the last 2 weeks designing what she called the adaptive environmental suit, and she was eager to see it tested in real conditions. The suit looked like a hybrid between a spacesuit and medieval armor, covered in sensors and small panels that could adjust to environmental conditions. The temperature swings are the real problem, Sophie explained. pointing at her data. The gardens can go from -40 degrees to positive 120 degrees in less than a minute. Normal suits can't adjust that fast. The material would crack or melt. Commander Lisa Bennett reviewed the mission profile. What about the gravity? The readings show it's almost twice Earth normal in some areas. Sophie grinned and activated a hologram showing the suit's internal systems. Localized gravity compensation field. It won't eliminate the extra gravity, but it will reduce the strain enough that our people can move normally. And before you ask, yes, we tested it. Lieutenant Chris Palmer spent 6 hours in the high-gravity simulator wearing the prototype, and he's fine. Chris looked up from his console. Define fine. I felt like I was wearing a truck, but the suit worked. I could move, and I didn't get crushed. The bigger innovation was the drone swarm. Sophie had designed hundreds of small drones, each about the size of a baseball. They would deploy ahead of the human team and map the environment in real time, identifying hazards and predicting geyser eruptions based on seismic activity. Colonel Danny Wright had volunteered to lead the surface team. He was joined by Sergeant Nick Carter, a combat engineer who had survived 3 tours in the worst environments Earth had to offer, and Specialist Julie Morgan, whose background in geology and environmental science made her perfect for navigating the gardens. Ambassador Keltharis arrived at the Valiant just before the trial was scheduled to begin. His crystalline form seemed to glow brighter than usual. Captain Morrison, I must protest. The drone swarm you plan to deploy goes against the spirit of the environmental survival trial. Jake had expected this argument. Ambassador, show me where in the rules it says we can't use drones. The trial says we have to retrieve the marker from the center of the gardens. It says we have to survive the environment. It doesn't say we have to do it blind. Keltharis seemed to shimmer with frustration. Every other species uses their natural abilities to navigate. The Xelians use thermal sensing. The Crothians use enhanced strength to power through. You're using technology to gain an unfair advantage. Colonel Danny Wright stepped forward. He was a big man, built like a tank with a face that had seen too many battles. With respect, Ambassador, what you call technology, we call survival. The Xelians evolved on this kind of world, so they have thermal sensing. The Crothians are naturally tough. Humans didn't evolve in the Void Gardens. We evolved on Earth. Our natural adaptation is that we're really good at building tools that let us survive anywhere. You want to disqualify us for that? You're not testing our survival ability. You're just saying only species that evolved in hostile environments are allowed to pass. The logic was solid, and Keltharis knew it. The Council had already backed down twice on similar arguments. Changing the rules now would look like they were specifically targeting humanity. Very well, but I want it noted that this interpretation will be reviewed after the trials are complete. Danny, Nick, and Julie suited up in the landing bay. The adaptive environmental suits were works of art, covered in sensors and flexible panels that could shift and adjust based on the conditions. Each suit had its own power supply, life support system, and emergency protocols. Sophie had built in so many redundancies that the suits could survive almost anything short of a direct hit from a nuclear weapon. The team stepped out onto the surface of Zell, and immediately the suits went to work. Temperature sensors detected the ambient heat and adjusted the internal climate control. Gravity compensators activated, reducing the crushing pressure. Atmospheric filters engaged, processing the toxic air into breathable oxygen. Julie took the first steps, testing the suit's mobility. Feels good. Gravity is noticeable but manageable. Temperature is stable at 22 degrees inside the suit even though it's -30 out here. Nick deployed the drone swarm with a thought transmitted through his neural interface. The small machines shot forward, spreading out in a pattern that covered a quarter-mile radius. Data began flooding back to their helmet displays, creating a 3-dimensional map of the terrain ahead. Geyser field 200 meters ahead, Nick reported. Drones are detecting seismic patterns. Looks like they erupt in a semi-predictable sequence. Danny led them forward, following the safe path the drones identified. They moved carefully, watching their surroundings for any threats the automated systems might miss. The gardens were beautiful in their own deadly way. The crystal formations reflected light in strange patterns, creating rainbows in the toxic fog. A massive geyser erupted 50 meters to their left without warning. Superheated steam shot into the air with enough force to strip flesh from bone. The team's suits registered the temperature spike, and the protective panels shifted to reflect the heat away from their bodies. Drones missed that one, Julie noted. adding it to the hazard map. They continued deeper into the gardens. The quantum marker was located in what the survey data called the amphitheater, a natural bowl in the landscape surrounded by the most active geyser field on the entire planet. It was designed to be nearly impossible to reach. The drones mapped the amphitheater from every angle. Julie's computer analyzed the data, looking for patterns in the chaos. Geysers erupted seemingly at random, but random meant unpredictable by biological senses. Computers could see patterns that organic brains missed. "There's a rhythm," Julie said after 20 minutes of analysis. "It's complex, but there's definitely a pattern. Every 43 minutes, there's an 8-second window where a path opens up to the center." 8 seconds? Nick asked. "That's not much time." "It's enough if we're fast," Danny said. "We'll position at the edge, wait for the window, and move on my mark. Julie, you grab the marker. Nick and I will cover the approach and exit." They waited at the edge of the amphitheater, watching the geysers erupt in sequence. The drones continued to refine the prediction model, counting down to the window. At 42 minutes, the team prepared to move. At 43 minutes, the pattern shifted. "Go, go, go," Danny commanded. They ran. The suit's power systems engaged fully, and the gravity compensators worked overtime to let them sprint across the purple soil. Geysers erupted on either side of them, missing by meters. The path was exactly as Julie had predicted. Julie reached the center and grabbed the quantum marker, a small device that pulsed with inner light. Got it, moving to exit. The return trip was faster because they already knew the safe path. They emerged from the amphitheater just as the next geyser cycle began. Behind them, steam erupted from every vent at once, creating a wall of superheated death where they had been standing seconds before. The team made it back to the Valiant without any injuries. Total mission time, 2 hours and 17 minutes. The previous record for the Void Gardens trial had been 6 hours, and that had been set by the Xelians, who were native to similar environments. When they removed their helmets, Sophie was waiting with diagnostic equipment. "How did the suits perform?" Danny handed her his helmet with a smile. "Like a dream. We had full mobility, perfect temperature control, and the gravity compensation worked flawlessly. Your drones saved our lives at least 3 times by predicting geyser eruptions." Ambassador Keltharos was less impressed. "You treated the trial like a technical problem to be solved rather than a test of survival instinct." "It was a technical problem," Julie said. She had taken off her suit and was reviewing the data they had collected. "The gardens are hostile, but they're not magical. Everything follows physical laws. Temperature, pressure, seismic activity, all of it can be measured and predicted. We just used the right tools to do it." The council convened again, and the debate lasted even longer than before. Some members argued that humanity was making a mockery of the trials. Others pointed out that the humans had followed every rule exactly as written, and had succeeded where many other species had failed. The final vote was close, but humanity passed the third trial. 3 down, 1 to go, but everyone knew the final trial would be the hardest because it wasn't about strength or intelligence or survival. It was about leadership and the ability to sighten. The 4th trial began without warning. Jake Morrison was on the bridge reviewing supply reports when the entire ship lurched. Warning lights activated across every console. The Valiant's navigation system showed impossible data. A rogue black hole had appeared on their sensors, moving on a collision course with a heavily populated star system. Ambassador Keltharos appeared on the view screen, but this time he looked different, less solid somehow. "Captain Morrison, the final trial has begun. What you're experiencing is a highly advanced simulation, but it will feel completely real. You have been placed in command of a galactic emergency response fleet. 3 billion lives are at risk, and you cannot save them all. Show us how humanity faces impossible choices." Before Jake could respond, the bridge transformed. The Valiant's familiar controls disappeared, replaced by a massive holographic command center. Jake stood in the middle of it, surrounded by status displays showing 12 different species ships, 3 populated planets, and a black hole that was eating space itself. Commander Lisa Bennett appeared next to him, also caught in the simulation. Lieutenant Chris Palmer materialized at a tactical station. Dr. Helen Price joined via a neural link from Earth, her consciousness inserted into the simulation as an advisor. The parameters appeared in front of Jake's eyes like a nightmare written in numbers. 3 billion sentient beings spread across 3 planets. Evacuation capacity for 1 billion beings maximum. Time to decision 6 hours. Time to complete evacuation, 48 hours. The black hole would consume the entire system in exactly 48 hours. Chris ran the numbers twice, hoping he had made a mistake. Sir, the math is brutal. Even if we use every ship in the fleet at maximum capacity, we can only evacuate 1/3 of the population. Lisa studied the planetary data. Planet Alpha has 2 billion inhabitants, mostly children and elderly. Planet Beta has 1 billion, primarily working-age adults with technical skills. Planet Gamma has 500 million, but their species can survive in harsh environments if we relocate them. It was the kind of choice that had broken every species that had attempted this trial. Save the vulnerable and doom the capable? Save the skilled workers and abandon the helpless? Focus on those most likely to survive and let the others die? Jake looked at the data for 30 seconds. Then he made a decision that would have shocked the Galactic Council if they had expected it. We evacuate all 3 planets simultaneously. The simulated alien officers in the command center immediately protested. A Crothian commander growled, "That is impossible. We do not have enough ships." "We don't have enough evacuation ships," Jake corrected. "But we have cargo haulers, military vessels, science ships, and private transports. Every ship with a functional pressure seal can carry people. Strip every non-essential vessel to skeleton crews and convert them to passenger carriers." Lisa caught on immediately. "Sir, the conditions will be terrible. We're talking about packing people into cargo holds with minimal life support. It will be crowded, uncomfortable, maybe even dangerous." "Better than being dead," Jake said flatly. Chris ran the calculation. How many people can we evacuate if we use every available ship, regardless of original purpose? Chris's fingers flew across the holographic controls. If we strip military ships to essential crew only, convert all cargo space to passenger capacity, and run the life support systems at maximum sustainable load, we could evacuate approximately 1.4 billion people. It was better than 1 billion, but still far short of 3 billion. Jake looked at the fleet composition again. There had to be something they were missing, some resource they weren't using efficiently. Dr. Helen Price spoke up from her neural link. "Captain, what if we don't try to evacuate everyone to a single destination? The simulation assumes we need to transport everyone to the nearest habitable system, which is 6 light-years away. But there are multiple destinations within range." Jake pulled up the star charts. Helen was right. There were 3 different systems within 8 light-years, all with at least marginally habitable planets. The math changed completely if they could split the evacuation across multiple destinations. "Split the fleet," Jake ordered. "Group Alpha takes the elderly and children from Planet Alpha to the nearest habitable world. Group Beta takes the working-age population to the industrial colony, 3 light-years out. Group Gamma takes the environmentally resistant species to the frontier world." A new problem appeared immediately. A radiation storm, inserted by the simulation to add chaos, damaged 30% of the fleet. Standard emergency protocol called for abandoning damaged vessels and consolidating survivors onto functioning ships. It was the logical, efficient choice. Jake made a different choice. Negative. We're not abandoning those ships. Engineering teams, start cannibalizing parts from the working vessels. Get those damaged ships operational. Sophie Martin had been brought into the simulation as an engineering consultant. She coordinated repair teams across the fleet, pulling components from ships that didn't need them to fix ships that did. It was chaotic and inefficient by normal standards, but it worked. Within hours, they had recovered 25 of the 30 damaged ships. The simulation continued to throw challenges at them. A planetary government on Alpha refused to evacuate without their cultural artifacts. Religious leaders on Beta demanded priority boarding over children. Transport ships began experiencing mechanical failures from being pushed beyond their design specifications. Jake handled each crisis with the same approach. Find the rule everyone assumed was fixed and change it. When the Alpha government demanded their artifacts, Jake had them loaded into empty cargo containers that would have gone unused otherwise. When religious leaders demanded priority, Jake pointed out that their faith presumably valued the lives of children and offered them the honor of being the last to board instead of the first. When transport ships started failing, Sophie designed rapid field modifications that could be done in hours instead of days. When life support systems were pushed to their limits, Helen calculated exactly how far they could be overloaded without risking complete failure. 12 hours into the simulation, a personal crisis emerged. Dr. Alan Cooper, who had been assigned to one of the evacuation transports, sent a distress signal. His ship was experiencing cascade failures. Life support would collapse in 15 minutes. The nearest rescue ship could save his crew of 20, but only by abandoning a civilian evacuation run that would save 800 people. The council observers, watching from outside the simulation, leaned forward. This was the moment that broke most commanders, when the choice became personal, when it was someone you knew versus strangers you would never meet. Jake's response was immediate. "Alan, this is Morrison. Stand by for rescue." "Captain, the math doesn't work," Alan replied. His voice was calm, almost resigned. 20 crew versus 800 civilians. You know what the right choice is? "The right choice is to save everyone we can," Jake said. "Lisa, what's the status of cargo ship Delta 7? Lisa checked the fleet display. "Ahead of schedule on its run. Currently empty and returning for another load. Reroute to Alan's position. They can make the pickup and still complete their scheduled civilian run if they push their engines to maximum." The cargo ship changed course. Alan's crew was rescued with minutes to spare, and the civilian evacuation continued without interruption. It wasn't the choice the simulation expected. It was the choice humans made when they refused to accept that anyone had to die if alternatives existed. The simulation continued for the full 48 hours. Every possible disaster was thrown at the human-led fleet. Equipment failures, medical emergencies, political complications, resource shortages. Each time, Jake and his team found solutions that the simulation's designers hadn't anticipated. They negotiated with planetary governments, improvised repairs, pushed every system to its absolute limit, and refused to accept that loss was inevitable. When they ran out of ships, they requisitioned private vessels. When they ran out of time, they created relay points where evacuees could be transferred from slow transports to faster ships, doubling the effective capacity of the fleet. At hour 46, Lieutenant Chris Palmer delivered the final count. His voice was hoarse from lack of sleep, and his hands shook slightly from exhaustion. "Sir, final evacuation numbers are in. We've evacuated 2.1 billion beings from the 3 planets. Jake stood in the center of the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the successful evacuations. Ships were scattered across 3 different star systems, packed with refugees who had been given a second chance at life. But the display also showed Planet Alpha, Beta, and Gamma still had inhabitants. 900 million people who wouldn't make it out before the black hole arrived. Evacuation incomplete, the simulation announced in a cold, mechanical voice. 900 million casualties when the system is consumed. The countdown reached 0. The holographic display showed the black hole consuming all 3 planets along with everyone still on them. 900 million simulated deaths. The simulation ended and the bridge of the Valiant returned to normal. Jake's crew looked exhausted. None of it had been real, but the emotional weight was crushing. They had saved more than 2 billion people, but they had also... The Galactic Council chambers were massive, built to accommodate hundreds of different species from across known space. The walls were made of some kind of adaptive material that changed color based on who was speaking, and the ceiling was transparent, showing the stars beyond. Jake Morrison walked into the chamber with his crew, and for the first time since leaving Earth, he felt genuinely nervous. This wasn't a trial anymore. This was the real thing. Humanity was about to be officially inducted into the galactic community, and the ceremony would be broadcast across thousands of worlds. Billions of beings would be watching to see what these new humans were really like. Ambassador Keltheris floated at the center of the chamber, his crystalline form glowing softly. Around him sat representatives from dozens of species, the Crothians with their massive frames and rocky skin, the Mindari consciousness manifesting through several crystal structures, the Xelians in their environmental suits, and many others that Jake didn't recognize yet. "We are gathered here," Keltheris began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "to welcome a new species into our community. Humanity has completed the trials of ascension in a manner that has challenged our understanding of what is possible. They have shown us that there are many ways to solve problems, many approaches to challenges, and many interpretations of what we thought were fixed rules." A Crothian elder stood up, his massive form making the platform creak. "I wish to speak about the first trial, the combat challenge. For thousands of years, we Crothians have been the standard by which physical strength is measured. We believed our champion was unbeatable through pure power. Then a human female, smaller than our children, defeated Grometh using technology that amplified her strength. At first we called this cheating. There was a murmur through the chamber. The Crothian continued. But then we realized something. Our strength comes from millions of years of evolution on a high-gravity world. We were born with this advantage. Humans were not born with it, so they built it. They took their natural intelligence and created artificial strength. Is this so different from using the strength our evolution gave us? We have decided it is not. The humans taught us that there are many kinds of strength. A Mindari crystal pulsed with light, and their collective voice filled the chamber. We wish to speak about the second trial, the telepathic negotiation. For our entire existence, we have relied on our ability to read thoughts. We believed this made us superior negotiators because deception was impossible. The humans could not read minds, so they built technology to simulate it. But more importantly, they realized something we had forgotten. The Mindari presence seemed to shift, almost embarrassed. We had become so dependent on reading thoughts that we forgot to observe behavior. The humans could not see into our minds, but they could see our reactions, our hesitations, our patterns. They read us as effectively as we read them, just using different methods. They reminded us that communication is about more than just accessing information. It is about understanding. A Zelian representative encased in a suit designed for their native atmosphere stood next. The third trial in the Void Gardens was meant to test survival in our native environment. We can live there naturally because we evolved in similar conditions. Most species fail this trial because they try to match our natural abilities. The humans did not try to become like us. Instead, they brought the environment they needed with them. The Zelian gestured toward the holographic display showing footage of the trial. They wore suits that created a safe environment inside a hostile one. They used drones to map what they could not sense naturally. They analyzed patterns in the chaos, and they completed the trial in record time. They showed us that survival is not about being adapted to one environment. It is about being able to adapt to any environment. Jake listened to all of this with growing understanding. The trials had not just been tests for humanity. They had been lessons for the Galactic Council. Each trial had revealed something about how the established species had become comfortable with their own advantages and had stopped thinking about other possibilities. Keltharis spoke again. And the fourth trial, the test of leadership and impossible choices. This trial has broken more commanders than any other. It is designed to have no good solution, only choices about who lives and who dies. Most species approach it by trying to optimize the outcome, to save the most valuable individuals, or to follow logical protocols. The crystal alien seemed to look directly at Jake. Humanity approached it differently. They refused to accept that the parameters were fixed. They changed evacuation destinations, stripped ships for parts, pushed every system beyond its design limits, and saved twice as many lives as any species in history. They still lost 900 million people, and they carry that weight. But they saved 2.1 billion who would have died if they had accepted the limitations we set. President Karen Foster appeared on the massive view screen that dominated one wall of the chamber. She was broadcasting from Earth, and behind her Jake could see crowds of people gathered to watch the ceremony. The Galactic Council asked if humanity was ready to join the galactic community. After completing your trials, I have a question for you. What does it mean to be part of this community? Keltharis seemed surprised by the question. It means following the established laws, respecting the ancient traditions, and maintaining the order that has kept peace for thousands of years. With respect, Karen said, that sounds like stagnation. You have laws that are 10,000 years old, traditions that haven't changed in millennia, an order so fixed that you design trials assuming everyone will approach them the same way. Maybe humanity is joining at exactly the right time. Not to break your laws, but to remind you that laws can evolve. Not to destroy your traditions, but to show you that new traditions can be created. Not to disrupt your order, but to prove that order and innovation can coexist. There was a long silence in the chamber. Some species looked offended. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked excited. A small alien from a species Jake didn't recognize stood up. They looked almost like a bipedal otter with scales instead of fur. I represent the Vexa, a younger species that joined the Council only 300 years ago. We have struggled to find our place among races that have been established for thousands of years. We have felt pressure to conform, to accept that our youth means our ideas are less valuable. Watching humanity complete the trials has given us hope. If they can challenge 10,000 years of tradition and be accepted, perhaps there is room for all of us to contribute new ideas. More species began to speak. and Jake realized that the ceremony had turned into something else entirely. It was becoming a debate about the future of the Galactic Council itself. The younger species were excited about humanity's approach. The older species were divided between those who saw it as dangerous and those who saw it as necessary. Commander Lisa Bennett whispered to Jake, "I think we just accidentally started a revolution." "Not a revolution," Jake whispered back. "An evolution." After hours of debate, Keltharis called for order. "We have heard many perspectives today, but we must complete the ceremony. Captain Morrison, on behalf of humanity, do you accept membership in the Galactic Council with all the rights and responsibilities that entails?" Jake stood up and walked to the center of the chamber. He felt the weight of billions of eyes watching him, both human and alien. This moment would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. "We accept," Jake said clearly, "but we also want to make something clear. Humanity didn't complete your trials to prove we're better than anyone else. We did it to prove we deserve a seat at the table. And now that we have that seat, we're going to use it. We're going to propose new ideas. We're going to question old assumptions. We're going to push boundaries and find solutions to problems you've given up on." He looked around at all the assembled species. "We're not here to replace your way of doing things. We're here to add our way to it. You have species that are stronger than us, smarter than us, more naturally adapted than us. That's fine. What we bring is a perspective that refuses to accept that anything is truly impossible. We bring 10,000 years of human history that proves limits are meant to be challenged." Lieutenant Chris Palmer stood up next to Jake. "You designed trials based on natural advantages. We showed you that technology can create advantages where nature didn't. You assumed telepathy was necessary for negotiation. We proved observation and analysis work just as well. You thought survival meant biological adaptation. We demonstrated that environmental control is just as valid." Dr. Helen Price's voice came through the communication system. "The Galactic Council has maintained order for thousands of years, and that's impressive. But order without growth is stagnation. Humanity offers growth. We offer the constant drive to improve, to innovate, to find better ways of doing things. Not because the old ways are wrong, but because there might be new ways that are better." Keltharis listened to all of this, and slowly, his crystalline form began to glow brighter. "The vote has been completed. Humanity is officially welcomed into the Galactic Council. But I want to note something for the records. In all my years as an ambassador, I have never seen a new,